Busted, another busy week for you. This week a double away from home rather than at home, and the first of those coming up tomorrow night at Oxford, so obviously a long journey for you. But first off, how's everyone kind of feeling and I suppose looking off the back of the weekend?
Yeah, everyone's good. Boys have come in this morning. We've had a good session up the top. We went through some stuff in the classroom, which Louis led on for the analysis for Oxford tomorrow. And then the boys have had a meeting amongst themselves after as well. We feel it's really important that we try and keep the momentum going with our performances. I've said a few times, sometimes the results kind of you can't control them, but you can control the performance. So it's really important that we keep the momentum going with that side of things. And as you see, two long trips this week, two really tough games against two good sides. Two different sides who look at the game slightly differently, both on 3G services, so that's another little challenge for us as well. But yeah, we've got such a really good group of boys that we're looking forward to the challenges. We don't fear anything or anyone. We're looking there and we're going to go and try and attack both games. But it's really important that we look to tomorrow and don't focus on Saturday. We need to really focus on tomorrow because Oxford are a really good side. The way the play is going to be difficult for us. We have to stay organised, we have to be really good without the ball, and then obviously with the ball we have to be even better than we had been, because that's the progression of the group, that we keep getting better.
Yeah, and you mentioned the artificial pitches, obviously a double this week, both on those as you said, but what I suppose does that actually change really? It's always kind of a thing whenever you go into a side who are playing on an artificial pitch, it's always one of the first things that people tend to mention, but what is it that specifically kind of changes for you on that front?
I think the surface changes a lot, to be honest. I think the tempo in which the ball moves, the way the ball moves, it's sometimes the passes where if it's on grass they'll fizz across, it'll more bounce across on the 3G, sorry, so your touch is slightly different. The way you pass the ball might be a slightly different technique in some circumstances. The way the ball bounces is a little bit different as well, and obviously we train a lot on 4G, so we're used to it as well, but it's certainly a different surface to play on the mock grasses, yeah.
And Oxford specifically, of course, a new side to the Division 1. You haven't played yourselves before, but I mean, up until Saturday, they'd been on quite a good run. I think it was 7 unbeaten that we're up to until that point. So, although it's always an adjustment coming up to the National League, it's one they've fared quite well with. So, not well, obviously no game's an easy game for you, but very much tough opposition, and they've ran quite a few teams towards the top end of the league pretty close as well. Yeah,
no, Oxford are a really good side. We've watched them over several games. They like to move the ball similar to how we do as well. They've got some really good players, some technicians in there as well. Obviously they're riding a bit of a crest of a wave because of the promotion and things like that, and it'll be a good place to be at. I'd imagine the energy's really good. They'll be looking for a response as well after Saturday's defeat, so that's something that we've got to be wary of, and we ultimately have to focus on ourselves and make sure that our mindset and our mentality is right for tomorrow's game. But we're under no illusion how hard it's going to be in terms of the team that we're going to play. We know individually what we've got to do, we know collectively what we've got to do, and as I say, that's all we can really concentrate on. Then we have to understand that we're playing a good side, but we focus on ourselves.
Yeah, and I mean, mentioned to Mike probably last week a bit as well, with the amount of games that you have at the minute, it's probably natural that eventually things potentially have to sort of swap around, whether it's people coming off the bench a bit earlier, things like that and what have you. But when it's sort of speaking to, I suppose, players about that individually is a bit more of a difficult conversation at times, where obviously every player wants to play every minute possible in every game they can, or do the lads here kind of know sometimes that when they're playing Tuesday, Saturday every week, they maybe can't keep playing 90 minutes back to back all the time?
No player ever thinks that they can't play back-to-back 90 minutes, which is it's difficult. I've said it to you before, I think it was a couple of years ago, it's the hardest part of this job, this role, because all the boys are such good people first and foremost, and obviously they're really desperate to play on a Saturday. They're desperate to get in the flow and get game time, and ultimately when the team's playing well, it's hard to rotate at times because you want to keep that momentum going, as we've talked about. But I think for the players who aren't getting in, it's only going to hold them in good stead. They need to keep coming in, keep being positive, keep giving it all, keep having that good energy around the place. I think, obviously, I've spoken about it previous as a player myself. There was a lot of times where I wasn't getting in squads and wasn't getting in teams, and I really made a point of being good around the changing room and helping the team, because that ultimately is, if the team does well, then you're going to do well. But there was moments as well where I probably, if I could take time back, I should have been a little bit better and I should have been a little bit more positive. And that's what I try and help the boys with who aren't getting in. I always say to them, there's no one knows better than what I do, what it feels like to not be in a squad and not be in a team. So I try and help them with that emotions, and ultimately it's just a way of them growing. They've got to take it. They've got to try and work as hard as they possibly can, and they've got to do everything they can to get back in the team. And then when they get back in the team, they've got to really do everything they can to keep that shirt. And that's just the ruthless side of football, which is really tough. But I'm really wary to make sure that the boys are in a good headspace, so I do check in with them a lot to make sure they're feeling okay. We'll have a lot of one-to-one meetings to see how they can improve and how we can help them, because as I say, it is horrendous when you're not playing. You do feel really bad, and ultimately there isn't a nice way of putting around it. You've just got to work hard and keep patient and keep positive and try and get back in the team.
And on specifically like in-game situations, I suppose, on that kind of similar thread, really, over the past sort of year or so, you've had a bit or a few more kind of stats wise at your disposal in terms of how far lads are travelled during games and things like that. And I think you've said before that obviously plays into your decision in making subs during games and things like that. But how much has that affected those decisions, I suppose? Are you kind of going a little bit blind and a bit of an eye test before, where you're just trying to look and see if lads are tired? We've
obviously got the metrics of what boys what the threshold is, and once they go past that threshold, we can look to freshen it up on the pitch. And then it's important that we look at the data after the game as well and see where boys are at, and we're fully aware that the travel takes its toll as well. Boys are going to be sitting on the bus for a long time this week, so I don't want to say there'll be rotation, because sometimes in football you just never know, but we will look to be playing sort of the freshest players, and as the gaffer always says, it's the 11 that he thinks is the best for that day that he will pick. So we'll obviously sit down as a coaching staff, we'll talk about what's best for the group, we'll talk about what's best for getting a result and getting a performance in the game, and we'll make our decisions based on that.
Yeah, and of course, in terms of like form and league standards and everything at the minute, obviously compared to this point, last season you were in a much healthier position in terms of the league table. So I suppose, or at least I imagine, it's more pleasant for you as coach and staff. But I think you've said before, obviously you learned a lot last season, so I suppose without that you wouldn't have the position that you are in now. Yeah,
it's tough, because obviously within this career of being involved in football, I know there's going to be tough times again, so it's making sure that you do enjoy the times where you're doing well, but real have that mindset as it shouldn't really matter whether you're doing really well or you're doing really poorly. Your work rate still needs to be the same, it still needs to be balanced. You still need to look for improvements all the time, you still need to look at where you can strengthen, and that's something that obviously as a coach and staff we're working on. We've had the real highs, we've had the real lows of last season, and at the minute things are going well, but there is going to be tough times ahead, so it's making sure that we don't change it all. We're positive with the boys regardless if we lose, if we get beat, and the process is always the same. We want to improve players every single day, so whether we win on Saturday or whether we lose on Saturday, we come back in Monday and we want to improve the boys on a Monday. So as long as that's our key and that's our goals, to try and improve individuals and try and improve the football club, the results of what the football club are going through shouldn't make much difference to our arousal. But yeah, in terms of sort of this time last season, it was really hard. It was the first time that we'd had really real tough times, but what we did do really well was we learned from it, we stuck together, we made sure we took note of how we were feeling at that time and what was going wrong and what we kind of got right. But as I say, the job is just about learning all the time and trying and improving ourselves as well as the boys, and I feel like that's something that Mike instills on us all. Is it's a journey, and you're just trying to improve on the journey and ultimately trying to keep the football club in a really good place for as long as we possibly can.
Yeah, and then just finally on the injury side, of course the main two that have been out recently been Conor Panny and Callum Whelan, who've been sort of in their ongoing rehab processes. But how are the pair of them looking at the moment?
Yeah, so Panny trained this morning, and I must say he was outstanding. He was absolutely brilliant up at training. He's obviously had that injury, that fracture, and we've just had to manage him and make sure that we don't throw him back in too soon. But this morning he looked like he was really there, where the levels that we want him to be at. So no doubt he's going to be banging on the door, wanting to be in the squad. And to be fair, that's the best way to do it, rather than actually come to the manager and say I want to be in is just shown in training, like, yeah, I'm here and I'm ready. And he certainly showed that this morning. So he'll be pushing to get back in the squad. Wheelo's still a couple of weeks out. He's doing his rehab with Chris. It's progressing all the time. He's injury free now, so it's just in terms of getting him back up to speed, getting him back up to match fitness, which we're hoping will be 2 or 3 weeks, and then he's going to be huge for us. It's going to be like having a new signing, so it's all pretty positive at the moment. Everyone's chomping at the bit to play. Everyone's doing all they can to improve the on-field side of things. So yeah, it's a good place to be at the moment. But as I say, our job doesn't change in terms of trying to improve ourselves, the players, and the football club.